Hello, I'm Johannes Zinzendorf, and this is the story of how we started the Hermitage. We settled on the land on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving in 1988. We spent the next several days moving our stuff from our rental house in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, the 85 miles to our land up in the Appalachian Mountains. There was only a barn on the property, a big barn, about 30 by 80 feet, um, and that was it. Of course, the barn had nothing in it. I mean, it was basically one giant room. There was no kitchen, no restroom, no lights, no heat, no electricity, no toilet. It was basically one large room. So we decided that in order to survive, we would need to subdivide a smaller room. And we had the materials. We had the 2x4s for the framing. We had uh, the nails. We had the plywood for the walls. We had the saws, the ladders, the hammers. We had all of that ready. And in order to survive while we made the room, we had brought up our 11-foot camping trailer and parked it right out in the barnyard. Our first night on the property, we had arrived back there late with our last load from Bethlehem. It was way after dark. It was very, very cold. It was basically below freezing all the time. We were there now. And the next morning, we had to get up and go to work. We were fortunate enough to find jobs in our respective fields. My partner, Christian, would go off to work in the morning as a special ed teacher, and I would go off to work to the newspaper as a reporter. And we gleefully, joyfully went to work because work had all the perks that we did not have in the barn. There was heat at work. There was electricity, lights, drinking fountain, bathrooms, phones, microwaves, computers, all that neat stuff. So that very first morning, when we got up and opened the door for the first time onto our land, it was really very unpromising. Um, the wind was howling. It was snowing. There was ice in the barnyard. And we were looking upon a barren wasteland. That part of the farm was basically one giant field. And there were no trees anywhere except along the far edges of the property. It was barren. It was on a ridge in the middle of this valley, and the wind howled, just howled, and the landscape was just textures and varieties of whites and grays and browns. The snow was horizontally blowing. It was, as I said, it was very, very unpromising. So we gleefully went to work. We came back home in the evenings after it was dark. Again, this was late November, moving into December. And then we had to start working on our living quarters. There was so much to do that Christian had his work, I had my work, and so we really were not able to help each other. For example, it was dark. We had flashlights, but there was no one to hold the light for us. So I would hold my nail in one hand and the hammer in the other, and the flashlight I simply had to stick in my mouth. I was fortunately used to putting large things in my mouth. As a friend of ours once said, "Gag reflex? What gag reflex?" So there we were. I was standing on the ladder. We had to be on the ladder really for most of our time because we needed to put in a ceiling, and above that was going to be the sleeping loft. So basically in the darkness of the barn, I would hold the nail in one bare hand because I could not wear gloves while I was hammering. I simply could not hold the nail firmly with gloves. So my hands were bare, and they were turning red in the below freezing weather. They were starting to tremble, so I had the nail in one shaking hand. I had the hammer in the other shaking hand. The idea, of course, is to hit the nail firmly and squarely on the head and drive it right into the wood. Well, that would work actually pretty well for a couple of times. And then there would come a time where with my shaking hands, the nail would be at an angle, the hammer would be at an angle, the hammer would hit a glancing blow to the nail, which would fly out of my hands, shooting right past my head, right past my eyes, into the darkness behind me, where I would hear it hitting the barn floor. Well, the last thing I wanted to do was go back and look for the nail in the darkness. So I simply would pull out another nail and try and get a good blow on this. Of course, if I missed the nail, often I would simply hit my finger, my thumb instead. The idea was to finish the sleeping quarters while we still had all of our thumbs. So this is the way we built our sleeping quarters. It would go bam, bam, ah, bam, bam, ah, and that's the way we did it. So sleeping quarters were finally finished. We moved in. Now, furnishings, Spartan. We had a kerosene heater, and kerosene heat is not all that great even in the best of times, and of course this was far from the best of times. We had two chairs. We would sit next to the fire, putting our hands directly over the heat, and while the front side would warm up, the back side would be freezing, so we'd have to stand up, turn around, warm up the back side while the front side froze, and then we would have to turn again. We were doing this slow balletic pirouette, or if not absolutely balletic, it was, I think, actually more like a pair of rotisserie chickens turning round and round. Now, for entertainment, or keep ourselves simply busy, there was a table, there was a kerosene lamp, and we would try to read them. That was all there was to do. We would try and read the newspaper in our shaking hands or a book in our shaking hands, and since the whatever we were reading was shaking, it was rather like trying to read during an earthquake. So basically we would give up. We would just give up pretty early in the evening. It was depressing. We would look at each other and say, fuck it, let's just go to bed. So we would climb up into the sleeping loft, or up the ladder. Now, obviously, we were not sleeping like most people sleep today. For example, there was no bedstead. There was simply a mattress on the floor. And instead of sleeping on top of two mattresses like most people sleep today, we were sleeping an old-fashioned Pennsylvania Dutch way, because we were in Pennsylvania Dutch country. And the Dutch, some of them well into the 20th century, would sleep actually between two mattresses, rather like a sandwich. And the bottom mattress was what they called a strohsock, or straw bed. It was like a giant cloth baggie, and there would be straw in it. And when the straw is fresh, it actually sticks up through the cloth right into your back. So the idea is that you need to smash it down, reach around, flatten it out. Now, hot sets is really good for flattening out straw. You want pretty much a little valley, okay, and you actually would lay in that valley. Now, over the strohsock is a linen sheet, a homespun linen sheet. That's what they made. They made linen on their farms, and you would lay on top of the linen sheet. There would be another linen sheet over you, and over the whole thing would be what would keep you warm. All right, this would be the feather deck, or the feather mattress, filled with chicken feathers or goose down. And just as feathers keep a bird warm, so it would keep you warm. The only drawback to this situation, to this setup, was the linen. All right, because think of when linen is worn these days. Right? It's worn in the summertime. Think of Southern gentlemen. Think of Tennessee Williams, Truman Capote, Palm Beach, Key West, white linen suits. It keeps them cool. All right. Well, that's the last thing you want in December is to be kept cool. All right. So we would basically wrap ourselves around each other, arm over arm, leg over leg, huddled together, trying to keep warm.